Right, hello, welcome to the Sisyphus complex solution, and this is the start of a new series, which the series itself and that is going to be called Retribution. And so I kind of figured that it's incumbent to begin this particular series with part one being titled Divine Retribution, because basically the balance is needed for any kind of functioning society to work effectively. And what that does basically mean is that if you're looking towards that balance, you do need to make sure that certain types of wrongdoing has consequences, just as much as it requires the courage of conviction in order to be able to do the right thing. Now, what I'm going to do is begin this series with a bit of a basic explanation of what my intentions are with this, because it will become a little bit more controversial as time passes. Of that much I've got no doubt. But let's just give an overview as to what it is that we're looking at to begin with. Now, this is kind of a representation of one of the big problems that we tend to have at the moment, and have done for probably a few years now, where you have this situation of people claiming that they're sort of waking up and they're becoming aware of what's happening in the world today, and they generally tend to sort of shift towards this search for the bogeyman at the top of the pyramid. You know, who's controlling the world, and we need to focus on finding out who that particular group of individuals are. So, you know, you've got to have somebody to blame, and you always have to aim upwards. Now, when it comes down to that, depending on who it is that you talk to, where it is that you look, the names and the organisations will differ, and it's lots of people have got lots of different theories about lots of different things. And so the one thing that it does all have in common is that it doesn't matter which way you guess or have some level of credible information, doesn't really matter. The one thing that is consistent throughout is that you're going to do precisely bugger all about any of it. Nobody's going to do anything about anything based off of everybody pointing towards what they think is the top of the pyramid. I mean, I've done this to a certain extent myself, and from time to time still do to a degree. But for this to be the focus of where retribution can be found, that's where the error takes place. If we truly want to do anything about all of the things that keep on being forced upon us, and I'll go into a little bit more on that in a moment, but if we would truly want to be able to push back in any way, shape or form, the focus has really got to be here. So you can imagine that you've got some raging lunatic, a general of an army. So if we have to choose the bad guy example, if we imagine that Hitler is the baddie name that everybody wants to cling to, let's just imagine that Hitler is at the top of the pyramid. Well, consider the impact if that particular lunatic is backed up by an army of useful idiots. Now, take away that army of useful idiots, and what have you got? You've basically got the lone voice in the wilderness with nobody to commit atrocities on his behalf, have you? It's a fairly simple equation. So, I mean, the result is effectively the difference between millions of people being sacrificed at the behest of the ravings of a lunatic, or, on the other hand, one deluded idiot that can be easily restrained. I mean, literally nothing happens if the useful idiots are not enacting the instructions of the lunatic. Pretty straightforward, isn't it? So it does beg the question as to why it is that we haven't really been focusing on the useful idiots. I mean, the base that it is literally the basis of every kind of individual lunatic or lunatic ideology or anything else like that. It all depends on the useful idiots feeding into the lower ranks of the hierarchy. If you cut off the supply of useful idiots, well, basically, all you're left with is those higher ranks just being the lone bedwetters that they actually are. Because otherwise they wouldn't be obsessed with doing the crap that they do in the first place. So, retribution then is about cutting off the supply of the useful idiots. So, if you think this isn't a method that's already essentially being employed against us, well then, what do you think the purpose of something like this crap is supposed to be about? I know it's having certain types of a turning of the tides at the moment. It's being treated more like a release of the Oscars nowadays. But for the longest time, this type of activity has been very effective in making sure that useful idiots remain idiots. They're too scared to do anything. I mean, what do you think this sort of propaganda is for? You're all supposed to be scared of the bogeyman words, aren't you? You say the wrong thing that they don't like and you get the label. And then the useful idiots will alternatively be trained to be compliant with the goody words. You have to be destroyed if you say the baddie words, or if you think in the baddie way, and then you get rewarded if you become a useful idiot. It's a fairly standard type of methodology that's been employed around ideology ever since you can look back in history, really. So it is this matter of we need to turn the tables on this sort of stuff and concentrate a little bit more on what it is that the goody side, as that they tend to try to present it as. What's the reality behind that? And what are these useful idiots actually doing as a result of complying with all of this sort of nonsense? Now, obviously, both of these lists are not exhaustive by any stretch of the imagination, but it just gives you a little bit of an idea. And it's obviously something that you should be able to recognise. So, just to be clear again, what is it I'm talking about in terms of the consequences of what happens when you have this kind of system being put against us and for useful idiots to be compliant with it on a wider societal level? What does it actually result in? Well, it's not insignificant consequences, is it? This isn't a case of trying to turn the tables because we want to whine about something that is a little bit unfair. This is quite literal death and atrocity. And that really does have to be emphasised. It is about death and atrocity. It is killing people in vast numbers because of ideology. And it is killing people in vast numbers through falsehoods. It's raping and killing children. At the lower level, you could turn around and say, well, it's also pushing things like the cancel culture that still does exist. You've still got things like the people having the bank closures. And then, of course, you've got the situation of people going to prison for hurty words. Remember, when it comes down to the hurty words scenario, that can also have consequences. Because remember Peter Lynch, the guy that died in prison for protesting against children being killed. He didn't do anything wrong. He stood there with a banner. That's all he did. And he's dead because of that. And all of these things are taking place while the very people that will try to vilify you for noticing things like this, they will also be out on the streets, and they will also be in various institutions supporting terrorists, murderers and pederasts that they will all get together to try to protect. All of these things do not happen unless they're enabled by useful idiots. And that's just a simple fact. So what are we looking towards doing here? Well, first and foremost, you have to understand where the useful idiots are found. The ones that can actually have the kinds of impact that lead to those real death and destruction results and consequences. Well, they're obviously going to be found in government, aren't they? And I don't just mean central government, I mean all of government, all public sector, down to local government as well. So that means we're looking at around 6.17 million public sector workers, all useful idiots, all fair game. You've got all the NGOs, all the useful idiots that work with NGOs, and that goes from the United Nations right the way down to local activist groups. All of them, fair game. You've got the World Economic Forum, which basically, yes, their membership would be clear targets. All of the corporate organisations involved in that, they would be clear targets, but it's not limited to them. This is just a representation of any organisation that is working hand in hand with governments to lie, cheat and steal from you, and to facilitate death and destruction. Then you get other ideologues that are involved in this, that generally are well known by their participation with the far left, and that means union funding. We're already looking at a pretty big target base, and then there's even more that we can target, because then you do have all of the useful idiot organisations are associated with the unions, such as your Socialist Workers' Party, which are really quite stupid enough to walk around the street calling other people Nazis whilst being called the Socialist Workers' Party. So we're not talking about intelligent people here, are we? There is a reason why they're known as idiots. So everybody that plays the useful idiot role within these organisations are fair game to be exposed, to being humiliated, and where possible being exposed to the point where it could lead to prosecution. Because don't forget, like I say, as I've just literally covered, these absolute scumbags are literally behind activities that are leading to people being killed. This is not hyperbole, it's fact. So don't let anybody believe that anything along these lines of seeking retribution against these people is some kind of persecution of the innocents, because it isn't. So what is this process going to be doing, and what's it about? Well, in the main, it's pretty obvious, really. It's turning the propaganda back on them. The way that they like to do things, well, let's shine a light straight back on them, shall we? Let's name and shame all of them at every single level. Make it an absolute embarrassment to be involved with any of these organisations. And certainly call out every single useful idiot that gleefully targets the public with this lunatic agenda that they've been pushing for far too long now. These people that will just doing my job as they attack the public to the point of death and destruction. Oh, it's not my fault, just following orders. No, that went out in Nuremberg. Make it very personal. Because I'm going to be making it very, very personal. I'm going to be naming individuals and precisely what it is that they're doing. Overall, it's about creating a hostile atmosphere for them. Make it something that far exceeds any of the kind of propaganda that they have forced on us for way too long, resulting in death and destruction. The key difference to this, of course, will be that their attacks have been based on ideology and lies, whereas ours will be based on truth. That's the difference. That's how you get your balance. And that's why it will be retribution. Does that explain it? Do you understand what I'm going to be doing? You'll be able to go into the links in the description, and that's for anybody that wants to be able to do some sort of level of whistleblowing. Let me know information on specific individuals, and like I said, I don't care what level they're at. It doesn't have to be people at the top. I'm prepared to go right down to people that are just the cleaners. If they're doing something against us willfully, fair game. You'll see some contact details in the description. And obviously, no, I won't be giving out anybody's name that wants to do any whistleblowing. The only thing that I want people to make sure that they do is to give some backup of evidence as to any kind of claims about people. Anybody that's doing the remotest thing wrong, feel free to let me know, and let's start exposing people. But like I say, I won't expose you. Obviously, I'll be making a start on this myself, whereby, and I'll be perfectly honest about this, that I've got a real personal beef going on right now with the DVLA and the organisations around them. But what I'm going to be doing with that, in terms of getting the process running, is I'm going to be approaching that from a higher level. Because the problems that I have with them started with an issue that begins at a higher level. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because there is a much, much wider consequence that goes beyond any kind of accusation of me being petty about my gripes with the DVLA. There is something there that does have the key element of some level of justice being required, because it does lead to death and destruction. So I'm going to be working on that one when I start moving into the process. And I'll make sure everybody understands why I'm making that target, where the lies are, where the agenda is, and then who is responsible for enforcing everything that causes that death and destruction. And there'll be a lot of people to be named and shamed around that one. when you go into these things, you may as well go in big. So that'll be something that you'll have to look forward to when I move forward with the process. It'll give you at least some kind of perspective, though, as to how big this gets is entirely dependent on the low level useful idiots. And like I say, it's a pretty big base to be working with and targeting. About time we give them back an awful lot more than they've forced upon us. And let's see what kind of changes this can result in. If we start to, don't just leave it down to me with the small audience that I've got. Let's start spreading it wider and let other people do this sort of stuff as well. Let's start really hammering it at home that we're not going to put up with this shit anymore. Okay? So that's what this is going to be about. And it starts proper in part 2. Okay? Alright, cheers. See you later.